This is Motorsport Radio.
1, 2.
Join the conversation. Contact the show on Twitter, on Facebook, and on our website, Motorsport Radio.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Motorsport Talks. This is actually a club racing special, and to make it even more special, we've actually got a guest on the show. None other than James Mansell from James Mansell Racing. Someone has finally agreed to come and talk to me on the show. It's taken over a year, but we've finally got there. How are you doing, James?
Yeah, I'm doing good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing good. Now, for those of you who don't know who James Mansell is, he's I've only spoken to him for a few hours, and I'm a little bit inspired by him because he started off at go-karting like most people did. Unfortunately, he did suffer from ulcerative colitis, which wasn't known at the time, and he had to step back from motor racing. He has, however, returned by, should we say, throwing yourself in the deep end with a 24-hour Silverstone race at the C1 Silver Lake Series. And, well, why don't you start by saying what you're off to this season?
Yeah, sure. So this season, I've got a full season in the Praga Trophy, which is run by the 750 Motor Club. It's everyone's running the EP3 Civic Type Rs. It's a control series, so we've all got the same spec parts. We've all got the same spec tyres, and hopefully the emphasis is a bit more on skill than budget. Hopefully.
Yeah, I must admit, I saw the series last year at Brands Hatch Indy, and it was incredible. So competitive. If you haven't seen it, guys, check it out on YouTube. 750 Motor Club are quite good. They stream all the races live, and it is an incredible series to watch. It's so competitive. But I'd like to ask, how did you start to get into motorsport? What gave you the bug that you then couldn't get rid of?
Well, I did a bit of indoor rental karting when I was younger, when I was a kid. Got quite into that. It, was going every other weekend or whatever it were. So that's where it started, really. I didn't do that much, growing up a bit, and then sort of got back into it more recently. Like you say, by sort of chucking myself in the deep end. Well, it was karting from being a kid. That's where it started. Yeah,
definitely. And obviously, it's not easy getting into motorsport, getting into sort of where you are now with the Praga Type R. So, what sort of challenges have you faced getting to where you are now?
I think the big challenge that we all face in motorsport is budget, innit? That's the big one. It's not a cheap thing to be part of. That's one of the reasons I was drawn to the Type R Trophy. Is A, because it's spec series and you don't have to just constantly throw money at your car, and B, they do this foundation program, which is a package deal of being able to get the car, the entries, everything just all paid for in one deal, which works out a bit cheaper than a traditional route in. And then obviously the other, what sort of was a big challenge has been the ulcerative colitis. So that was 2015. I was sort of diagnosed, quickly hospitalised, and then ended up having emergency surgery. So when I come out of that, and I've got, I come out with a stoma, which is constantly on my stomach now, conveniently just where a harness sits, just to be in the way. So when I come out of that, I thought that it might not, motorsport might be dead after that, but I'm glad to say it's not. I can still do it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, nothing should really hold you back. Obviously, as you said, money and sponsorship is obviously the hardest thing because it's not cheap. And as they say, it's not a profit way of doing things. It's You definitely lose money doing it, don't you?
You do, yeah. I mean, I've literally put. I thought I'm just going to go for it this season, so I've literally put everything I've got into just getting onto the grid. Oh, I'm hoping for no big shunts or anything that really stretch the budget. But like you say, it's so hard to getting the money together. I'm working most nights of trying to speak to sponsors and partners and try and extend the budget a bit and bring them a bit of value. But it is hard work, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And just for the viewers at home and the listeners at home, how many rounds is it, and then how many races per round? Is it like touring cars with 3 per round, or is it more?
Yeah, there's 12. They class each race as a round in it, but they have 2 or 3 races in a weekend. So overall, I'm just checking now. There's mostly single day races, and then there's 2 double header rounds. I think total we're something like 14 rounds, I think total, but across 6 or 7 weekends.
Yeah, and just quickly, what circuit are you most looking forward to racing around? I know every racing driver has one.
To be honest, most of them are new to me, because I've not had that much previous experience. So I've got I've just done a test day at Alton, which was on Friday, which was very wet. I think I'm looking forward to doing Donington. I think I've not done Donington before, so I'm looking forward to that. Probably, yeah.
Okay, and then what series would you see yourself aspiring towards? Like, what is your ultimate goal?
It's hard to say, innit? I think most people would sit here, or we'd all sit here and just go, well, you want to be in touring cars or something like that, don't you? Inevitably, but it's a bit of a pipe dream, innit? But at the minute, I'm genuinely just concentrating on this season ahead, seeing what kind of momentum I can build, seeing what I can do with partnerships and sponsors, and seeing what we can build from there. It'd be nice to get into something like the JCW Minis or something like that. But it's all big money stuff, isn't it? So we'll see. And
where do you see yourself in this championship? Like, what is your target? Do you target a championship title? Or do you target a top 10? Or
it's another difficult one. I've not, because of the limited budget. I've got limited testing happening, so I've not got much data at the minute to even see where I'm going to stack up. We just done a test day at Alton, but it was in the middle of this horrendous storm, wasn't it? So the times we're getting are obviously not indicative of where we're going to be. So, and also when you look at the grid, it's a 30 plus car grid with a lot of fast, experienced drivers up at the front of it. So, in all honesty, I'll be happy. Well, I'll be more than happy if I can finish in the top half of the grid for the end of the championship. But it's genuinely going to be focus on learn as much as get up to speed as quick as I can.
And I'm guessing you hope to do this as a multi-season deal. So you this season you want to keep going in the same season and just keep trying to get better and better.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not in it just for the one series, just for the experience or whatever. I'm in it hopefully for the long haul now. It's with the foundation thing. I've put the big investment in, or to me, big investment in up front to get on the grid. So yeah, it's just about building momentum, and yeah, I'm hoping to get through this one, learn as much as I can, and come back next year stronger.
Yeah, and you said you said about your foundation. Do you want to tell your viewers about the charity and all the foundation work that you do, and about the charity that you work with?
Yeah. I mean, the foundation I mentioned was the Prager Foundation to get on the grid. But yeah, the other charity stuff is basically I'm trying to bring as much awareness and raise as much money as I can for Crohn's and Colitis UK. It's obviously a charity that is close to my heart from what I've been through, and they provide a lot of help, a lot of information for people in the same situation. So all that, when I was in hospital and everything, all the booklets and all the information, all the support all comes via them basically. So yeah, I've had a chat with them, and they're happy for me to run with them as a partner on the car this year.
And for the viewers at home, say if they wanted to donate or help, do they have a website where they can donate, where they can help, volunteer, whatever?
Yeah, they do. It's I think it's crohnsandcolitis.org.uk. You can donate directly to them, or help out in any way. They've got Facebook and Instagram accounts and all that. And like I say, I've got bits of plans for myself this year to do my own fundraisers for them as well. So that'll be the other way to get involved. I've also been speaking to a few people in the sort of support community, and I'm hoping to get a few people out the community out to the track to come and see us and have a day out as well.
Yeah, I'm sure they'd really appreciate that. Obviously, you're technically just starting, with this being your first whole season. What advice would you give to someone listening who's thinking, I'd love to do that, I'd love to get involved in one of these championships, one of these cheap championships? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think the advice would be that just start trying to get involved in motorsport in a broader sense. So whether that's joining your local motor club, doing a bit of marshalling with, or finding friends or friends of friends or whatever that might want a bit of help at the track or anything. I think that's the best place to start, because if you just when you're just looking in from the outside, it looks like a bit of a minefield to get into and a difficult place to get into. But once you start speaking to people in the community, you find different ways. And I found this. There's this foundation deal to get in, and I've got a mate helping me with a trailer. I've got another mate helping me with setup at the track and stuff like that. So it's all these relationships you build from the community.
Yeah, definitely. And then finally, how and where can our viewers and our listeners follow you and follow the Type R Trophy?
Yeah, well, so for me, all my social medias are the same tag. It's just Mansell Racing. There's a mansellracing.co.uk website. So, you can follow me on there. I'm going to keep the website up to date with all the information, links to the live streams and what have you. And in terms of the racing, like you said earlier, they're actually really good at broadcasting these races. So you've only got to jump onto YouTube and either 750 or Prager will be broadcasting live. So it's easy to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and also don't forget that it's not expensive to go and watch the Type R Trophy, because it's not a premium event in some ways. It's cheap, why not send your family down? People listening, why not just go down, support James Mansell, support the Type R Trophy? Most of the events will probably be only about £10 or £15 for an adult. it's a great day out, and it's a great day to get into motor racing, to get that bug. And you never know.
They obviously, like you say, it's cheap day out, and it's not just the Type R's on there when you turn up, because it's a 750 event. You've got all sorts of different formula throughout the day. There's something for everyone, isn't there? So I went up to see him at Croft, and I was pretty much up from then. I went up to see a race and seeing everything else that was going on in the paddock, and like I say, it's a good day out.
Yeah, definitely, it really is. Well, thank you so much, James, for the interview. It was great talking to you, and I'm hoping we've inspired people to either to donate to your charity, to get into motor racing, to support you. Who knows what will come out of this? But I hope you've had a great chat with me. I hope I've not been asking too difficult questions. And we at Motorsport Radio will definitely be supporting you through the trophy this season.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks a lot for having me on.
That's all right. Thank you so much. And have a good rest of the night.
Yeah, cheers. See you later.
Hi, this is Nick Hamilton, and this is Motorsport Radio. Hi, I'm Harry Webb, and this is... What's it? Radio. I went out there. Hi, I'm Harry Webb, this is Motorsport Radio.
Motorsport Radio.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Ray from the Kawasaki Racing Team.
Hi, this is Nick Hamilton.
Hi, I'm Jamie Chadwick.
Hey everyone, I'm Bradley Smith.
Hi, I'm Joan Zacco.
Hi, I'm Bradley Wright.
Hi, I'm Seb Morris.
Hi, I'm Dan Linfoot from Honda Racing, British Superbike team, and this is Motorsport Radio.
This is Motorsport Radio.
1, 2, 3.
Join the conversation. Contact the show on Twitter, on Facebook, and on our website, Motorsport Radio.
So, hello, welcome back to Motorsport Radio. You just listened to the interview there with James Mansell. If you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it. It's live, and it was a fantastic interview. Hope it's inspired you to follow more British grassroots championships, and that's what we're going to talk about on this show. And joining me to talk about some of these championships is the Endurance and GT lead editor, Andy Lloyd. So hello Andy, how are you doing?
Lead editor, the only editor, I think. No, I'm extremely well, Josh. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing really good. And of course, we've just got Andy Hopley to join as well. How you doing, Andy?
I'm all right. Sorry about that, guys.
That's all right. So, yeah, as I was saying, obviously grassroots championships they're not massively followed, and I've for years not worked out why. I think they're brilliant, and I've loved going down to, you literally get up in the morning, go to Brands Hatch, 10 you've got a day of racing, and it's anything's racing. It's single seaters, sports, modified, everything's racing. Go through some championships that maybe people at home will be able to follow and maybe get involved with to help our grassroots and our sort of gentleman drivers and the club racing and raise up the spectacle. So I'm going to kick it off with a club that's, I think, one of my favourites, which is a classic touring car, classic the CTRC, and they've got this group of cars which they call the pre-66, 83, 93 and 2003. And I watched one of the races last year at Silverstone, and it blew my mind, the machinery that was on show. We are talking about M3s, Ford Escorts, Anglias, Morris Minors, to name but a few in the old ones. And then you can go all the way through, and you've got Ford, you've got the new Ford Escorts, you've got Ford Fiestas, you've got all sorts. This packed grid, they do these short races. And some of the cars are old touring cars that have previously raced in FIA spec races or British touring cars. Others are just road cars that people have raced modified. And this is incredible, Andy Hopley. I think it's great to have this sort of championship on the calendar.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can hear me, just let me know if you can't. But it is going to be fantastic because it's old touring cars that back in the heyday with obviously super touring. But it seems to be a lot of interest going on with what's going to happen because, like you said, it's the S2000s against the super touring class, and what mod you want, because it's going to be like up against basically what we're used to from the current breed. Obviously, with the BTCC going hybrid, it seems to be a lot of interest going on, but there's going to be a lot of classic cars that we've seen on the grid from previous years.
Yeah, the CTRC have actually confirmed they're going to do a super touring championship where any touring car from 2006 all the way back to the early 90s can take part. So that's any S2000 normally aspirated touring car and any super touring car. Now, the people at home right now will be starting to get a little bit of excitement because super touring, you immediately think a red Vauxhall Vectra. And you'll be pleased to know, guys, John Clennan's Vauxhall Vectra will be competing this year alongside other cars such as Anthony Reid's Nissan Primera in the white livery as well. This is incredible. And they're estimating a grid of up to 30 cars as well. So, as you said, it will be interesting to see how these super touring cars and the S2000 cars compete, because of course we never saw that. It was 1999, end of the super, or 2000, end of the super touring era, start of the TCT era, which then ran into the S2000 era. So we never saw any blend of either. So I think it'll be fantastic to see this very competitive and I think beautiful sounding and looking grid to race back on these circuits that we know, Donington, Brands Hatch, Silverstone, and I for one am incredibly excited. Andy Lloyd, obviously the CTRC, very famous, and the club championships in the CTRC, they're brilliant, aren't they?
Well, they are. I mean, I think the interesting thing about all club racing is that quite often it goes under the radar. You know, you go to a British GT meeting, or you go to like a national level series, and there are some support races. And you watch them, and they're sort of quite amusing, and you know they're great. But you're really there for the main event. However, within those classes can be some amazing machinery with fantastic stories behind it, and some fantastic racing. And it was funny in doing some sort of research for this show and looking at what the BRSCC organised. You kind of realise that there's a huge amount of really great motorsport, very competitive, grids of varying sizes, some small grids, some very large grids, often multi-class racing within those grids, with some great machinery, with fantastic pedigrees, drivers who are very experienced often within these classes, and the racing is brilliant. I mean, not always, but often you get some fantastic racing. So I think certainly for motorsport fans, it is worth investigating what is happening on a club level, because what has changed, of course, over the last, I guess, 10 years is streaming. And whereas before a lot of these club events would probably never have had national TV exposure, now they can be streamed onto YouTube and Facebook, and all of a sudden you've got almost proper TV coverage. So I think there is some great racing. I think it requires some investigation, some research, some planning, because you need to know what's running and when and where you can follow it. And I think you do need, I think like all motor racing, you need to follow a season so you understand who's racing, what they're racing, what the championship standings are, what the results were from the last round. That actually then makes a race come alive, if you like. But yeah, I mean, classic touring cars is a great championship, clearly very popular, big grids, great cars. What's not to like?
Yeah, and of course, who needs an excuse to watch a 1960s touring car Mini go completely sideways around Beckett's? And one of the championships which I've seen a few times, and it's intrigued me, is the Jaguar Challenge on CTRC. Mainly, the intriguing aspect of it is the sheer amount of Jaguar XJRs that race. They're not race cars. XJRs are the big, boxy limos, four-door saloons with the big 4.2 V8 supercharged. And yet, there's 6 or 7 of them racing. And when you see them attempt to make the Croft hairpin, it's almost a 3-point turn for them because they're not exactly small vehicles. And it's just great. It's just this grid of Jaguar XJ8s, XKR, XK8s, all these big Jaguar models, which, let's face it, Jaguar haven't really got that much of a racing pedigree beyond the prototypes. And yet here we are, we've got a championship of 20-odd Jaguars competing almost every weekend. That's what makes it look good. But I'll go back to Andy Lloyd, because the BRSCC have joined with the Aston Martin Owners Club. And this leads to some very interesting championships, doesn't it, Andy?
Well, it does. I mean, you've really got within their class structure something for every Aston Martin race car owner. You've got the GT4 Challenge, which is specifically for entry-level GT racing. I mean, I think as well, it is worth, you know, we kind of bandy around the terms sort of entry-level and club racing as if participants in this, you know, it's costing them a couple of £100 a year. It's not. It's, you know, these cars are very valuable. They're very expensive to maintain, and they're expensive to bring to a circuit and run, because you've got to come with a team. That team's got to be paid. That team's got to be fed. That team's got to have overnight accommodation. So, you know, let's not kid ourselves. This is not cheap racing. This may not be a season in GT World Challenge, but it's still not cheap. But you've certainly got you've got a great championship in the GT4 Challenge. You can then move to the GT Challenge, which is for post 96 GT cars, where you've got any GT4, any GT3, and an open GT class for sports or saloon cars of any type built between 95 and 2007. I have followed some of those races. They sometimes don't get the biggest grids, and sometimes they combine those grids with the I think they call it the Intermark Challenge. So you get really interesting grids where everybody is racing against each other, but in some respects they're not, because they're all racing within their individual classes. So sometimes there can only be 1 or 2 cars in a class, but they're still out there to race. And I think this is where there's a race to watch, but there's also the spectacle and the sound of some really nice cars being driven at speed around some great circuits. So it's certainly something that I should be watching a lot closer this year when I find myself at a circuit where these cars are racing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Andy Hopley, it's not just for the, to want a better word, the gentleman driver, the older, more experienced driver. There's a lot of very grassroots, entry-level sport in club racing, as well as the BRSCC, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to touch on that, we've got the obviously the Junior Championship, which is obviously basically Citroen Saxos. That is kind of, I don't know how to put it, but it's kind of the equivalent to the Ginetta Junior championship that we see on the BTCC support bill. But is that a way of saying, well, if you can't afford Ginetta Juniors, you can go into a Saxo, which is 14 to 17-year-olds, essentially for a cheaper budget? But then is the Ginetta Juniors basically somewhat they may look forward to if they decide, well, I've got a better budget? I'm not saying that people do or they don't, but is it because, okay, Ginetta Juniors is somewhere where they may head off to with that instead of going to the Saxo? I think the Saxo is kind of different in the engine size, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's hard to tell, but maybe you guys can at home may correct me if I'm wrong or correct, but that's all I'm going to say on that factor.
Yeah, the Junior Saloon Car Championship is a 1.6 litre Citroen Saxo VTS or VTR road car. So in some aspects, they're more powerful than the Ginetta Juniors, despite the fact they're for the same age group. But in other aspects, they're slightly slower because they're not sports cars. They're not race-ready race cars. They're road cars that have been turned into race cars. So the Junior Saloon Car Championship is brilliant. And I think what makes it unique is the fact that they are one of very few championships that get to run Knock Hill Circuit in reverse. So they run the opposite direction to the British touring cars. It's only chance it runs at Knock Hill, and it does one race one way and does the other race the other way. So it's a very unique challenge, and there aren't many racing series that actually do that. But there is so many club championships that run. I mean, if you look at the MSVR Club Championship, if you ignore the GB3 and GB4, you know, you've got Bernie's V8 in Historic Outlaws, huge V8 muscle cars. You've got the Champion of Brands Circuit, the championship, the Clubman Sports Prototype, the Enduro car, which I love. You know, I've been begging Motorsport Radio to do more on Enduro car because, one, they're Ford KAs, so they're not race cars. Two, they race endurance racing in these little Ford KAs, which, let's say, have been bought cheaply. Some of them aren't necessarily road legal / MOT passed. They've got amazing livery. I mean, last year we had a Rothmans liveried KA, a Golf liveried KA, to name but a few. You know, and the races are incredible. I mean, they do an Indy 500 minutes, for example, where it's a 500-minute race into the dusk around the Brands Hatch Indy circuit. But they're Ford KAs. Like, who came up with that idea?
It's crazy, Josh, because just to slightly just jump in, it's crazy to think a box standard road car like that, that's probably most people no longer own in real life. Maybe they do, but for that, it's personally great to see exactly what they come up for so many different championships. And it's crazy to think that, yeah, okay, MSV own the rights for that championship, but who would have thought it like these many years ago? Because the KA is now essentially the Ford Puma in, okay, hate to say it, WRC terms, but it's mental.
Yeah, and I mean, because I watch a lot of banger racing, and they banger race the Ford KAs. So that gives you an idea of just how old and how cheap they are, that they can be bought for cheap enough to be used for banger racing, and they're using it for racing. It's great fun, though. It's one of those championships that you just have to be there to watch, to experience, to go down to Brands Hatch and watch it. You know, and the other one that sort of strikes me is the Focus Cup, which features S2000 spec touring car Ford Focuses, like Team Aon used, like Motorbase used all those years ago. They're still using it. And this is what, and I'm sure Andy Lloyd can back me up here, this is what club racing is all about. It's using cars that aren't expensive to buy because racing teams don't use them anymore, or because they've been homologated out of championships, and put in championships so they can race them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a bit like back in, I'm just trying to think when it was, in the 2000s, the development of Group C racing. I mean, not club racing as such, because these are very, very expensive cars, but there was a guy who discovered there were a number of collectors who owned Group C prototype cars, loved the cars, maintained them, had nowhere to race them, and then said, well, why don't we come together and race them, and so built up from there a very popular scene, and they supported the Le Mans 24 Hours for a number of years, and the racing was great. You know, unfortunately, a few cars came off the circuit a bit bent, but you know, the racing was fast and furious. So I think it's really good when a market is identified, and this is probably, you know, there's a border between historic racing and the type of racing that we're talking about. I mean, going back to the point you made about racing Ford KAs, you've got to see the popularity of the BRSCC City Car Cup, which has massive grids, and they are effectively, I think they're primarily Citroen C1s. There's some Toyota Aygos on the grid, and Peugeot 107s, and this is really intended as proper entry-level motorsport. Yes, it's probably going to cost you $7,000 or $8,000 to get onto the grid, but once you're there, you can sort of maintain your own running costs and keep the costs as low as possible. Big grids, one-make racing, so it's always very competitive. It's very well managed. And I think this is another thing as well. When you have people who are maybe not as experienced in racing going out onto circuits, that whole race experience has got to be very carefully managed, because it could very easily turn into a crash fest if you weren't careful. And it is very well organised by the BRSCC. We were talking last week to JP Latham, who's the series organiser of the Student Motorsport Challenge, and that will be an inter-series within the 2022 City Car Cup Championship. And I think that just shows the level of professionalism and organisation that series organisers like MSV and BRSCC bring to it, that say, come along, bring your cars that you've invested time and money in. We know you're not experienced. We will make sure the racing is competitive and safe for you and give you an entertaining experience. And that really is what a lot of club racing is all about. But it's interesting when you start looking at things like the Fiesta Championships and the MS5 Championships within BRSCC, that you get people racing in those who have been racing those championships for many, many years. Very experienced racers. You wouldn't call them entry level, you call them experienced within a less expensive class of racing.
Yeah, and don't forget, of course, because we were just talking to James Mansell, the Praga Type R Trophy, which is the EK8 Honda Civics Type Rs, which, you know, for those of you who don't know Honda Civics that well, they're the early 2000 shape Honda Civic. So, again, not a massive outlay on the budget of the car. You know, you can pick them up for $4 or $5 grand. And the fact that they are basically road cars with a roll cage and a harness, racing seats, stripped with a fire extinguisher, they're only having to outlay £1,000, £2,000, £3,000 extra to get the car race ready. This is what club racing, I think, is all about. This is the 750 Motor Club. This is all of those. It's getting cars into championships where you don't have to spend £250,000 on a brand new Ford Focus touring car. You know, you can literally go on eBay, right, okay, I want a Citroen C1, there's one, £2,500, done 110,000 miles, I'll have that, that will be ready to race, done, you know? This is what's so good about it, as well as bringing these historic cars that previously couldn't race into motor racing. I mean, you know, everywhere you look, on any weekend around the country, there's these club championships taking place. Almost every weekend, something is racing at some circuit nearby. that you can then just go and see. As I said, it's £10. It's less than a fish and chips takeaway to go watch. I went to one at Rockingham before Rockingham closed down, and it went on for nearly 10 hours. And it only cost a tenner to get in. 10 hours of motor racing for 10 quid, you know? So it's absolutely incredible. I mean, the one that takes my eye is, of course, the Truck Racing Championship, which I would say Andy Hopley has, I don't want to say he's taken a bit of a downturn, but it has. It's sort of lost that popularity that it once had.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from, Josh, but to me personally, when you've got truck racing, okay, big wagons that are obviously, I hate to put a downer because I don't really know much about it, but you've got the cabin without the obviously trailer on the back, but you've got the pickups that are downsided, like exactly probably our version of the utes that are based in Australia. Sorry for anyone that I really offend about this factor, but it seems okay. Truck racing is evolved over here, but it's not really very well recognised in the sense that it would be abroad, say for example, or maybe the what is it over in Australia now? Is it the super trucks that it's now known as? I don't know. It's very weird, but it's not very addressed over here, according to my opinion. But maybe the viewers at home, or maybe yourself, Josh, may give me a bigger light in this fact.
I mean, let us know on social media, of course, Facebook, Twitter, and all this, and give us a like and a subscribe and share and all that about club racing, because we obviously want to promote it as much as possible, because we'd hate to see it lose popularity so much that it stops being run. It's going through, I'd say, some sort of a boom at the moment. This truck championship has been going on for years and years. I mean, Stuart Oliver, who tried his hand at touring car racing, wasn't the best. He did drive for BTC Racing on its debut, literally when BTC Racing turned up in touring cars with the out-of-date Seat Leon. He drove that, and he also drove the Lexus in 2003 touring cars, if I remember rightly. And he's a truck racer. I have lost count at 7 championships he's won. I have a feeling he's won more, so sorry, Stuart, if you're listening, but I'd like to say he's won 7. I'm not, again, it might be more, but he's won a lot.
But just quickly before we jump on to anything else, but with club racing, just to mention this out here, and this is just me being me, is the MG Championship. Okay, you got the MGBs, you got the MGZRs, but you've got the MGF, maybe /TF convertibles. What? You think that was outdated back in maybe 2001 when that championship came to an abrupt end? But now they're back racing again. Okay, I'm showing my true colours here, because I used to be a fanboy of the MGF Cup when it was running. Never seen it race, but I've caught up on it over the years of, ex-touring car racer Paul O'Neill. And I remember he put something on his Instagram, and I said, I remember you racing them. And he said, yeah, they were absolute rubbish to drive. But was that his opinion, or was that just because I remember him racing them? Okay, but that's all I'm going to say. But it's fabulous to see resurrections of the old MGF, maybe TF, you name it. Club racing is the way forward, because it's a stepping stone to the biggest categories out there, isn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong, though.
No, it really is. It is. It's just that. It's one of these things where people can use these club championships as a stepping stone into touring cars, Porsche Super Cup, or whatever, even Le Mans prototypes, ELMS. But they could also just stay there, like Stuart Oliver's done. He's just stayed there, There are drivers in these championships that have genuinely been racing. I mean, I was watching a stream last year of the 2CV championship. Someone's been racing in it for 31 years. That's all he's done. He started it, he raced in the first race of the 2CV championships, raced every single one since. This is what club racing is all about. I mean, Andy...
I think you make an important point there, because the way that the technical regulations are written is the fact that you can develop a car 1 year and you can probably race it in the same championship for many years to come, which adds to the cost effectiveness, if you will. You don't have to keep going out and buying another car for the next season or putting an Evo kit on it. I mean, you look at the Ford Fiesta Championships. You've got the Fiesta Juniors leading into the Fiesta Championships, and that has been a real growth area for touring car drivers. I mean, people like, I was reading Paul O'Neill, Josh Cook have raised, I was just thinking, who went on to actually, Ash Sutton, Matt Neal, Gordon Shen and Colin Turkington have all raced in the BRSCC Fiesta Championship at some stage, which just goes to show the way that as a simple, basic club championship is used as a proving ground, if you will, for the next generation of racers. And when you've got the Junior Fiesta Championship or Fiesta Junior Championship, allowing people to move, allowing young drivers to move through that into the main championship, that gives you an even better stepping stone.
Yeah, and I was going to come to you anyway, because there's a new championship in the BARC paddock, which is the Praga Trophy, which has taken some huge news, because this trophy, if I remember rightly, has obviously is factory backed by, I believe, a Czech company called Prager, and it's a championship that's basically its own individual championship, but it can be used as a stepping stone into the proper endurance categories like ELMS, WEC, IMSA, that sort of thing, can't it, Andy?
It could do, yes. I mean, the way that Prager... first of all, the Prager is a fantastic car, carbon prototype, tons of downforce and aero. It's a proper prototype racing car. A very well organised championship by the manufacturer. They've introduced... I followed it a bit in 2021. There was so much else going on that I couldn't devote a lot of time to it. But from what I saw, the racing was great. The racing was very close. They had this concept of like an amateur driver with a more professional driver alongside them. I think Jimmy Broadbent had a drive. James Walker, Mr. JWW, had a drive as well last year. I don't think yet it's produced anybody out of the Praga ranks that's gone on to a European Le Mans series or a higher level yet of prototype racing. But that is going to come, because they are well-built cars that give you a real sense of what it's like to drive with large amounts of aero, and will certainly be a great stepping stone into maybe looking at moving into LMP3s and then up through the ranks that way. So it's been a fantastic addition to the grid. It was part of the, if I'm not mistaken, part of the Brick Car Championship. It was a subclass at one stage when it was first introduced. I think it stood alone last year with its own individual races. But great. I mean, and the cars look beautiful, and they're very, very well presented as well. So an excellent championship to watch.
I mean, for the listeners who obviously have never heard of it before, is it possible to describe the Praga in something like, are they similar to LMP2 cars, or
it's
LMP3?
It's a prototype closed cockpit car, as all prototypes are nowadays. How it compares on power with an LMP3, I'm thinking probably slightly less. But nevertheless, in terms of a prototype car that's got a lot of aero, as a driver in that, if you could get up to speed and be on the pace with that, and you were put in an LMP3 car, it's not going to be a big leap. I wouldn't have thought. It's a car that you can set up. It's not an easy car to drive. I think it's a very rewarding car when you get it right. It's a 6-round championship. So yeah, I think it's probably one of the best stepping stones. And whereas LMP3 itself was designed as a stepping stone into the more senior classes of prototype racing, this is a stepping stone below LMP3 that I think certainly will breed future endurance drivers in the years ahead.
I mean, this is basically like one of the national stepping stones to get into that international paddock of LMP3, like you were saying.
Oh, very much. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, absolutely. It's well publicised. I mean, Prager have been very clever in how they've marketed that. They've used the power of social media. They got Jimmy Broadbent involved last year. Now, to those listeners who are not familiar with Jimmy Broadbent, bit of a phenomenon. He came out of sim racing. And of course, in the first year of lockdown in 2020, that just exploded, and he became very famous. He then morphed that into karting, and then I think it was early 21, he was offered the chance to be a guest driver in one of the Pragers. Did he do a full season last year? I'm not entirely sure. I'm pretty sure he's doing a full season this year. Thoroughly enjoyed it and presented that championship very well, as did James Walker, Mr. JWW, who's one of the leading automotive YouTubers in the UK. He did Praga last year. Again, I'm not sure if he's coming back this year. I think he probably will do. And again, presented it extremely well to a large audience. So I think it's had about as much exposure as you could wish for as a manufacturer at this early stage of developing a one-make series. Where they take it from here, whether they try to develop their own LMP3 car, who knows? But certainly I think as a proving ground for prototype drivers, I don't know what the budget is. I cannot believe it is a cheap championship. I mean, no championship is cheap, but I would have thought it's not, it's going to cost you some money to get into it. But a great proving ground nonetheless.
And don't forget as well, the winner of the Praga gets a new Praga already set up for the 2023 championship. So if they win this year, they get a free car to enter the championship, which is, it's not much better prizes if you want to continue in that championship. And
definitely.
I think what we're going to say here, just to slightly interrupt Josh, I think Jimmy Broadbent's going to be obviously YouTube sensation, isn't he? He's going to want to try and say, look, I've gone from sim racing virtually to now racing in a Praga like he did last year, to say, look at me, I'm going to be 10 times better. But I'm not trying to promote him. I'm not trying to literally say, I don't want to put him down because I subscribe to his YouTube. But he is a sim racing sensational. To jump into the real world of racing, it's weird. But okay, if they get a fully built specification for 2023, that's going to give a lot of sim racers an incentive to jump into the real world.
Well, this is it.
That's all I'm going to say, because I don't want to patronise people, but that gives some incentive. But let's jump on and just carry on for the thing. But I'll say more at a later date. But let's see what happens this year with Praga being maybe a single race category as such.
Yeah, and don't forget, guys, as I was saying, these championships will take place all around the country, and there is one of these club racing championships, as well as obviously the big meetings, but these club racing championships are almost every weekend at every circuit. And you're probably thinking, okay, so there are 10 each, so you could go to, I don't know, 10 and it's good, but then you think, oh, but I want to go to touring cars and British GT and I want to do a bit of Formula 3. MSV have thought about this, right? And the pass to see all 4-seater racing all season long. So this is one ticket to allow you into all MSV circuits for 4-wheeled racing all season is £249 per person. Sounds like a lot, but think of it this way. Touring cars cost you 36. British GT costs you about the same. That's 72. 5 club meetings, that's another 50. It starts adding up. This gives you and basically, this is like going to a football stadium every week. You could go to Brands Hatch every single week and watch racing for free for £249 one-off payment. There are other passes available on the MSV website. You know, you've got Alton Park, Cadwell. If you wanted to just do Brands Hatch, then 249 covers 2 wheels and 4 wheels. You know, so these passes, again, they are a brilliant way to basically get you to go to motor racing, to support the circuits, support the drivers. Some of these drivers, they're not full-time racing drivers. They basically work Monday to Friday with their car in the garage. They then put the car in the back of a trailer, take it to a race circuit, race it, take it home, and then back to work Monday. It's a 7-day job for them. And it's basically them paying for their addiction, their enjoyment. I mean, Andy Lloyd, you know, your endurance and GT editor and all this, there's a lot of GT championships taking place. Do you want to talk through some of these big GTs that you think people should watch, should take part, should enjoy to see?
Well, I think the Brit Car Championship, I think, is a fantastic championship. It very much aimed at the gentleman driver, supported by a professional. Races of various lengths at various times of the day. I went to an extremely entertaining Into the Night event at Brands Hatch a couple of seasons ago, and they run that championship to a very high standard. And last year the racing was excellent. Again, a multi-class format of GT3 and GT4 cars, both new and old. And other classes within that as well. Very good grids. A lot of drivers use that championship as a way to kind of hone their skills before they look at championships like GT Cup and British GT. So that's certainly one that I would mention. I mean, the class that I thoroughly enjoy watching is the MX-5s within BRSCC, where you've got the MX-5 Championship. They've changed it a bit recently. They've introduced I think they call it the Clubman Trophy within MX-5, Clubman Championship, which is effectively a one day over the weekend rather than the whole weekend, so it cuts down on overnight fees and logistics like that. The racing in the MX-5 championships, the grids are big, and the racing is taken very seriously. But there are so many championships, so many different cars that, you know, we could spend all night talking about different ones. So I think it's a case of really investigating amongst the BRSCC, MSVR, BRAC, look at everything they offer, choose the ones that you'd like to follow, see where they're racing, see what their calendars are, and go and buy yourself a ticket and enjoy it, because the racing is going to be great.
No, that's it. And I'll ask Andy Hopley the same question about, because obviously we know Andy Hopley loves a bit of touring cars. Would you say there is some good touring car championships within the club racing banner? And if so, which ones would you say that you should tell people to watch?
See, you're putting me on the spot here, aren't you? To be honest, guys, and this is for everyone at home, I personally think, obviously, the new CTC, whatever it is, with the Super Touring, because if you are brought up in the Super Touring era like I was, then you're not asking for potentially a lot more caliber and a lot more racing. But yeah, to see the Super Touring back on track, because you don't no longer see it on BTCC. Just bear with me while I get the camera right. But yeah, it's Super Touring in its day was fabulous, and to see it back as a club racing level is basically seeing cars that you A, may have seen, or B, if you're new to that era, then you probably think, why didn't I get to know it sooner than later? But that's okay. I'm being biased because I was brought up with Super Touring. But I feel like, yeah, that's what you should go for. But I don't know. You've really put me on the spot here with that, to be honest, Josh. And yeah, I'm not going to argue, but Super Touring, for me, if I was not into BTCC as I am now, then yes, I would be saying, well, that's what I've got to go for before trying the BTCC itself. But like I say, I hate to say this, just going slightly on a tangent, but with the touring cars now itself going hybrid, you want to witness what the cars sound like before they go hybrid. I'm sure people might agree, disagree, but if that was me new to BTCC, I'd be like, well, I've seen clips on YouTube with them sounding 2-litre Super Touring ordinary saloons like we have done in the past, compared to now electrified, then a hybrid boost. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't you go for the club racing just to get a rough idea?
Well, yeah, I see what you mean, and this is it, you know. Like you said, this Super Touring, that is a properly good sounding era touring cars with the S2000 as well. That 15 odd years that you had there, they sounded great. They were high revving, you know, forced induction cars, and it sounded beautiful. You know, V6s, you had normally aspirated 2 litres, you had all sorts taking part. And I'm hoping with this Super Touring that you get the Peugeots, you get the Primeras, you get the, you know, the BMW 3 Series, which was such a big car in the S2000 era. I'd love to see the Vectra, which I'm following one of the rebuilds. They're rebuilding one of the VXR Vectras that Onslow Cole drove. They're in the process of rebuilding. I'm hoping that takes part. You know, there's Fiona Leggett's Astra Coupe that is being reverted back to a 2-litre to take part. So we're seeing these cars come back that we've seen changed. You know, so it's going to be an incredible. Just to finally touch on it, in my view, right, I'm a bit of a Dagenham dustbin man. I love a nice Ford, okay? There's a couple of championships that I have to highlight. One of them is the Boss Championship, which is the Blue Oval Saloon Series, which has got some of the most insane Fords I think I've ever seen. Last year, there was an RS200 take part, right? And as we know, that is a Group B insanity. But you've got modified Ford Escort Cosworths, Sierra Cosworths with big turbo boost. Then you've got standard little Fiestas taking part, all in the same championship. Great, it's for all Fords, but there are Ford championships all through these club championships, which are for Fords. You know, the Vignal Detail ST-XR Challenge for XR2s, XR3s, and ST Fords, Fiestas, little hatchbacks with a little bit of a Essex talent, shall we say. You know, they're absolutely brilliant. And I know I keep mentioning it, but I beg you guys, please, just go down to witness. Go down to your local circuit, Brands Hatch, Croft, Thruxton, Snetterton, whatever. Just, you know, just look on the calendar and you see British touring cars and all this sort of stuff. But then you'll see a 750 Motor Club weekend. Go down there. 18 quid for a weekend. Why not? You get a bit of qualifying and practice in the day. Pit lane's open, so you can get involved in the pit lane for most of it anyway. You know, because it's not a big event. So there's not many people there. So the drivers are more willing to be happy. You can walk around, talk about their cars. I remember going back at Rockingham. There was a classic touring car racing series. And I was speaking to someone about 20 minutes about their Mini. And he was saying about how you drive the Mini, where you don't brake, you lift off until you get the speed down to just about the right amount, and then you floor it around the corner. You don't use the brakes when you're driving a Mini. You know, it's things like that. It's the talent that you see. It's the personalities that you'll see driving that you don't get with these big championships, because it's all televised and they're all sort of blended to say the right thing. The club championships, they can say what they want. You know, they're not for press, that they love it. And it is the fact that they love the fact that there are fans interested in their sport. So, you know, check out 750 Motor Club, BARC, BRSCC, MSVR. Check out the circuits and support the British Racing Series. That I know we will, and it'd be great for you. Obviously, let us know on social media, Facebook, Twitter. Obviously, you know, download the podcast. It's on, you know, it's amazing podcast. We've got Audible, we've got Spotify, so you can listen to me while you're in bed and listen to me while you're driving to work and all this sort of thing. That sounded a bit weird, but you know, you can listen whatever. It's great. But we're going to move on to basically we're going to move on to something new that I'm going to try. And it's not very exciting at the moment because we're in February and nothing's racing in February. But we're hoping to ramp it up. So when it comes to summer, this will be a huge list of what you can see and where you can watch it. Okay, but we're obviously going to start with WRC, which is back after a bit of a gap, because there normally is a bit of a gap in WRC. And it's back with a bit of a freeze, because they're racing in Sweden, not just Sweden, but they're racing quite north, exactly 700 kilometres north in the Västerbotten region. And Andy Lloyd, I'll go to you first. This is going to pose some massive challenges for the drivers and the teams, because they have gone from Monte Carlo, which was warm for Monte Carlo, to Sweden, which is Arctic.
Well, yeah, and it's probably the first and the only full winter rally that we've got this year. They haven't raced in Sweden for, is it 2 years? No, they didn't race there in 21. They raced there in 20 and 19. Yeah, it is going to be a big challenge. Plus the fact they're in the new cars, as we discussed the last time we were talking about WRC. They have all been out testing, so they are going to get some miles under their belt before they hit the first stages on Friday. But it is going to be a massive test. And of course, as we discussed after the last WRC round in Monte Carlo, that was a bit of a Ford-Toyota festival with Hyundai, you know, really struggling. So Hyundai have got to come back into this championship in a big way. And of course, Thierry Neuville has won in Sweden in 2018, and he's going to be gunning to at least get on the podium this year to get that manufacturer back into the championship.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's what I enjoy watching in Sweden is how they use the banks, because the snow banks, the rally drivers, they use them to get the cars around what are basically little tracks in the middle of the forest. And the last time they raced I think they raced in Sweden in 2020, it wasn't snow, it was gravel with a little bit of ice, but it was mainly gravel. So it sort of didn't have that same magic that you get with Sweden. You know, with the bonfires in the forest, as the fans trying to keep warm in the minus 100 million degrees Celsius that they get down there. You know, the fact that at any moment you could drive into a blizzard, the fact that you go slightly wrong on what is basically ice, you'll end up hitting a tree. This is what rallying is all about. And Andy Hopley, obviously round two, it's very early on in these new cars, I mean, they've had loads of miles of development and different rallying, and they have tested in Finland, in northern Finland, with these sort of snowy conditions. But this is going to be a huge challenge to try and keep everything warm. Not cool it down, but to keep everything warm.
I can see where you're coming from, but the forecast, from what I've seen, according to our document that we use for a Tuesday night, is that it's going to be a blizzard come shakedown and probably super special stage 1. It's going to be like unknown territory, but I don't mean that in a bad way for Rally Sweden, but because it's hybrid. It's, like I say, you've thrown me in the deep end of a freezing cold ice pool, should we say. But, you know, it's going to be great, but I think the obviously minus temperatures are going to be a new factor for hybrid, but to keep the cars going exactly how they're going to be, because like you mentioned, 2020 was a full gravel rally, but with a bit of ice. It's going to be the first time, because Monte Carlo was basically, ice and not how they expected the conditions. But I don't really know. Like I've just said, you throw me into a pretty much an icy pool full of ice, and I'm trying to get out and I'm freezing to death and not keeping to warm. But, you know, just clarify me on this. But it's going to be an unknown factor for everyone, not just spectators, media. It's also for the competitors, because they weren't used to it in 2020. So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, this is because obviously we don't know as fans as much as the teams do. And obviously teams will know how to deal with the temperatures. But it will be the interesting aspect is how the cars operate in these minus Arctic conditions that we'll get. I mean, Andy Lloyd, just quickly before we move on, make a prediction in Sweden. Where do you think Hyundai will finish? Do you think that the snow and the cold temperatures will be a bit more of a leveler for them and they might be able to catch up on Ford? Or do you think that Ford once again will just dominate like they did in Monte Carlo?
No, I think Hyundai would have worked very hard since the first round. My prediction is that we will see a Hyundai on the overall podium come the end of the weekend, certainly. And I think, I mean, it's interesting that when you look back at previous winners, Ott Tanak won in 2019, Thierry Neuville won in 2018. There's a very good chance now, with the experience that they've got of racing in Sweden, I think they're going to pull out all the stops, and I expect to see Thierry Neuville finish. I think they're going to struggle to win, but I certainly expect to see them on the overall podium come the end of the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't received they don't, annoyingly for WRC, they don't actually announce who's rallying until literally the day they start rallying. So we don't know. All we know is Esa Pakalapi is rallying for the first time since the Rally GB. So he's been so long out now. He's been joining in. Loeb will not be taking part. As we know, Loeb's only taking part in a handful. We don't know if Neuville will be taking part in this one. He might also sit this one out as Loeb sitting this one out. So that will leave it open for the Brits, you know, Breen and Evans and Greensmith to give it a go. But obviously, this isn't conditions they're used to. Maybe Rovin Pera can continue his, I would say he's sort of good form if we ignore Monte Carlo. Monte Carlo for him was a little bit of a big learning curve that he struggled with. Maybe he could come in strong, as this is sort of the rallying, the conditions that he grew up with. You know, this is what I love. It's the fact that in Finland, you expect these Scandinavian drivers do really well. And then you find out that they struggle. And then you find out that, you know, Evans, he does all right in these conditions. And he shouldn't do because he's from Wales, you know. So this is what's interesting. I mean, Andy Hopley, your predictions.
I'm laughing because yet again you throw me in that ice pool. But to me, Sebastian Loeb isn't there, and I'm going to be really biased. But I think Craig Breen and of course Gus Greensmith. Okay, that's me being an M Sport fan. But I think they'll be up there at sharp end because they've done a lot of testing over probably in Finland or wherever they've been testing to get used to the climate. But personally, I'd like to see Hyundai back in the top 3 somehow, because if they don't, then it's going to be a bit of a disaster for them to try and reignite their, I hate to say this because of obviously Tanak being part of the team. I don't know, but I want them to be back in the top 3 because they need to reignite their potentially their title charge, or maybe to get that manufacturer status back to where it needs to be. But I don't know. I think Elfyn Evans is going to be the one to be looking out for. Yes, he's Welsh. He's not used to the climate. But who says the rally drivers aren't used to climate when they've been rallying for so many years?
Well, this is it. And obviously it's on WRC Plus, which you can get for over £10 a month, I think it is, which is a subscription. I must admit, I have signed up for it, and I do like, they've changed it a lot from last year, and it is a lot better. The coverage is brilliant and all this. And I think it's great. It's great to have. But also, if you've got BT Sport will continue to show every stage live. So, you know, this is how you can watch WRC now. It's on BT Sport or on the app. And it's gonna be interesting. You're gonna have all sorts. You know, you've got a shakedown at 8 o'clock in the morning on Thursday. You've got stages. I think you've got stages Thursday night and then into Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday. So it's a long sort of rally for them, and it won't be easy because of the snow and ice. And due to the fact that we're in February, the only other sport that's taking part is over in America, which is the second round NASCAR, because for those of you who do follow NASCAR know, it's basically every weekend they're racing till November. And last weekend was a Daytona 500, which was an incredible race, I must admit. The new cars look incredible, they sound incredible, and they're a lot faster, and they're able to draft, and the draft is hugely beneficial for the drivers now, more than it was with the old car. We were seeing in the duels, there were cars that were getting dropped, and they were losing these 6 seconds a lap just due to the fact they weren't in the draft of another car. So obviously, we're at the Auto Club Speedway, which is a lot shorter. Therefore, there'll be less drafting, and this takes place on Saturday with the Xfinity Series, which is the feeder series, and then on Sunday with the race. This is on Premier Sports, which you can get on the app for £13 a month, or if you have it on Sky or whatever, it's on there. So that's basically all that's on this week. And I'm hoping that, obviously, the more we do this, the more we'll eventually have a huge list that go on for years and years as to what's racing. And obviously, we'll then pick our bit. But yeah, final word from you, Andy Lloyd, on the club racing, about why people should follow our advice and do something more this year.
Because I think there's a variety, because you will see some spectacular cars. If you're interested in racing cars in general, there's always something to interest you at that level of motorsport, because it is very accessible. You can get into paddocks. You may be able to get into pit lanes, although I'm sure there's going to be a lot of pit lane restrictions this year. You know, with the current sort of concerns about COVID maybe continuing, because it supports the race circuits and it gives them an income to enable them to put on motorsport. And because it's great to get out and actually hear the cars, smell the fumes, you know, stand in the rain on a bank and watch cars going around a circuit to my mind, is what motorsport is all about. So, There are numerous reasons.
Yes, and also from you, Andy Hopley.
Cheapest chips. That's all I'm gonna say. It's affordable compared to being a BTC fan of near enough 23 years this year, but it's cheap as anything. You can get it, as we said, like near enough a tenner to go and watch. That itself to me is tempting me to go and watch club racing at Croft, because Croft is only an hour and a half away from me. So come on, what more do I want? I need, if people say I need my arm twisting more than enough, you've already twisted it to make it go red before we even started saying it's cheap as chips. So come on, get down to your local race circuit. It doesn't matter whether it's Croft, Donington, Alton, you name it. Get to your circuit, because they need the help because of COVID over the last 2 years, maybe year and a half, depending on circumstances. But yeah, let's go club racing. Let's see what it's all about, shall we?
Yeah, see, and the final word from me, obviously, if you've got a young boy and you're thinking, I started watching motor racing in the 80s and all this sort of thing. I want to get my son to watch motor racing, or my grandson to watch motor racing. Just go. Tenner. I believe most of them will do under 13s free as well, so you won't have to pay for him to watch it. What more could you want? Thank you so much for being part of the show. Thank you so much for listening to people at home. And thank you, of course, to Andy Hopley and Andy Lloyd, editor of enduranceandgt.co.uk. Please check his website out to all the information about the FIA WEC GT World Challenge and so much more. And thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you again next week. Good night.
This is Motorsport Radio.
1, 2, 3.
Join the conversation. Contact the show on Twitter, on Facebook, and on our website, Motorsport Radio.